Hey FCBC fan, Pastor Mike here, and it is Tuesday night, which normally would be our TNT, Tuesday Night Transformation. But in the month of July, we're going to do something completely different. It's still going to be TNT, but it's the Tuesday Night Takeover. We're going to air previously recorded episodes of The Journey with Pastor Mike. Now, The Journey is a series of conversations I had with some amazing people where they shared their challenges along their journey, their obstacles, their hardships, their highs, their lows, and at the same time imparted some really good wisdom on all of us. And so I'm excited about this month. I'm excited about The Journey with Pastor Mike. And most of all, I'm excited that many of you will get to see it for the first time. Now, here's what I need you to do. I need you to take your phones out right now and make sure you follow Journey TV Live on Instagram and all social media platforms. Again, that's Journey TV Live. I'm looking forward to sharing these experiences with you. I hope you enjoy them. And most of all, sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey. Peace and blessings, family.
Joining us on the journey today is a creative media, marketing, and branding professional. Please welcome to the journey, FCBC's own, EmilWilbekin.
All right, let's give it up for Emil.
Thank you, Pastor.
So, listen, man, I'm glad that we're doing this.
Thank you for having me.
I knew you without knowing you. I was telling you, you know, for years, Emil was editor for Vibe magazine, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know. So when I first met him, I was like, so this the same guy? But look, tell me about those years when you were at Vibe.
Oh man, Vibe was such an amazing experience for me. It was my second professional job out of college. I quit my job at Metropolitan Home Magazine to go work at Vibe. My parents were like, what are you doing? You're going to go work at a magazine that is brand new, is about hip hop. And I said, well, wait, Quincy Jones and Time Warner are doing it. And they're like, oh, okay, go ahead on.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. I started on the startup team of Vibe, and I was there. I started as associate editor, and I literally worked my way up the ranks. So I was associate editor, then I became style editor, then I became fashion director. But then this blessing came. I was in Paris with Puffy, shooting him for his birthday, and I got a call from my boss, Danielle Smith, and she said, I want to tell you something. I'm resigning. And my heart sank as I said, if I go through, she was like my fourth editor-in-chief. And I said, if she leaves, I'm going to leave. She said, no, wait. I recommended you to replace me.
Yeah. Wow.
And I thought, my God. And I remember that night, I ended up going out with Puffy, Benny Medina, Lenny Kravitz, Kate Moss, and Stella McCartney. Puffy was one ear saying, you got to tell your boss to put me on the cover. Lenny was in the other ear saying, you got to tell your boss to put me on the cover.
And you the boss.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to be the boss. Yeah.
That's deep. It's amazing because sometimes we miss some people's departure is I think the universe shapes it to create space for us.
Yes.
Right? And this is no throwing shade on anybody. I remember when I was installed as pastor here, there was a pastor who was part of the installation service, and he was asking about the previous pastor as to why he left. I said, I don't know. I didn't want to get into that. And another pastor said, well, I'm telling you why he left. He left to make room for you. And that's what happens sometimes, right?
Yeah.
There are people whose departure may have one rationale, but sometimes it's creating a space of opportunity for others to kind of step into.
Yeah, and it was a real blessing for me because I didn't realize what becoming editor-in-chief of Vibe would mean for me and then for a whole community of people, because I was the first Black gay editor-in-chief of a national magazine. And thank you. Later I found out that all these young men around the country were looking up to me, and they said, seeing you on TV on VH1, seeing you on MTV made me realize that I could be somebody one day.
Wow.
So.
Now I want you to share something you shared about your personal life with me. The journey is about hearing the story behind the story, right? So give us a little piece of that story that has been formative, but that kind of pushed you in many ways.
Well, it's very interesting. Whenever I get into my dark spaces, my mother says, "You have been blessed, and God continues to bless you." And she says that because I was adopted. And at 7 months old, I was given up for adoption at birth. And my adoptive parents happened to be looking for a child. They wanted a boy. So I wasn't verbal. I didn't have like the mobility or the touch that most babies have. And so they said when they walked in the room, and this is God, I put my hands up to my father like this.
Wow. And they say you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I think about that moment, and God always shows me that he's got me.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because we don't even realize in our walks with God that sometimes it's not being verbal, it's the ability to stretch those arms out to God.
Yes.
Right? To show our willingness for God to come and to take us. But has that had any kind of impact on you personally, even as you matured and realized, did it have the kind of impact where I know I've spoken to some people who've been adopted, and it was always this sense of not belonging. Did you ever experience that?
I definitely had a sense of not belonging. I had a sense of abandonment a lot in my life. I've gone to therapy to deal with, intimacy issues with relationships, because it was very hard for me to connect, because I always had this fear that I was going to be abandoned. And it wasn't until last year, my mother has congestive heart failure, and she's been very, very ill, and I would go to Cincinnati like once a month to see her, and I said, I'm going to start videotaping her talking about my adoption. It's a book project that I want to do to find my birth parents. It was a very interesting moment where my mother said, "No, you are exactly what we wanted. And you weren't really abandoned." She was like, "You filled us." And she's like, "You are almost more like us than our natural son." And so that was really deep for me, because all this time I felt like, she's like, "Your mother had to give you up, and your mother's wish was that you would have a better life, so she won."
Wow. So talk to me about Native Son. I love the name of it, but talk to me about Native Son.
So Native Son is a movement and a platform that I created to inspire and empower Black gay men. I had been thinking I wanted to start something that was my own. And I'd been in publishing for so many years. I'd worked at Essence, I worked at Complex, I worked at Giant and Vibe, but I wanted to leave my own mark. And I think God was telling me, I want you to do something else. I have an assignment for you. So I got laid off. I went to India for 6 weeks on a kind of eat, pray, love mission. And so while I was there, I would hear my father speaking to me in my dreams. I kept hearing, what did you come to New York to do? So my dream when I moved to New York was, how do I move culture? And how do I do it? How do I show Black and brown people the way Rolling Stone and Vanity Fair and Vogue did? But the other part that I realized was I needed to give back to the Black gay community. I'm HIV positive, so I felt like I need to help other young Black gay men not live in shame, not live in fear, own who they are.
Yeah.
So I thought I want to come up with a platform that will inspire and empower Black gay men so that we can own our narrative, so we're not marginalized, and so we have visibility, but we have to heal ourselves because we are broken, wounded, and have breaches that we need to deal with within ourselves, but we need to heal ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't expect other people to do it.
Why Native Son?
So Native Son, the name is taken after James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. And one of the quotes that I use a lot from James Baldwin is that, "I am what time and circumstance has made of me, certainly, but I'm more than that, so are we all."
Yeah.
The movement is about celebrating who we are and seeing each other.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we don't see each other.
It's interesting. Let me just say this. Let's be real. There are people who in church who get uncomfortable with this kind of conversation.
I know.
And they get uncomfortable with it because there's this instant, for some people, not FCBC for whatever reason,
Right.
but we hear your story in that part of it, and there's instantly this sense of judgment that steps in. And in that very moment, people forget who we're called to be.
Right.
Right? Because everything you just described about Native Son could apply to anybody in this book.
Absolutely.
Right? Those to be reminded that we're not our circumstances, right? To be reminded that we do not have to stay in the margins or be ostracized because of who we are, right? And that means something, though, to be empowered and to see the things that other people may view as problematic as a blessing, right? To help shape who you are. And that is who you are. And that is a beautiful thing. I've always admired that because of your courage and your ability to just put yourself forward.
Yes.
And that is an inspiring thing, no matter who you are,
Right.
to not shrink back, but to put yourself forward. So here, you know the routine.
Yes.
So I need you to share with us about 3 things you think have been essential that you've learned that you can impart upon us from your journey.
So I will say, number 1, be faithful. Be faithful in the good times and the bad times, in the light and the dark. Be faithful. Number 2, I would say, is be grateful. And again, it's the same lines. In the dark and the light, be grateful. Be grateful for everything. Every morning I set my feet on the floor, I say, thank you, God. Thank you, God.
Yeah.
And number 3 for me is you are enough.
Yeah.
You know, I tell that to a lot of the young guys that I mentor. I tell it to my friends. I think we forget. We get caught up in this whole Instagram life and these reality shows and TV and everything so shiny. But in who you are enough.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be a member of FCBC because, you know, I'm a visionary and a dreamer and a doer.
Absolutely.
And I love that I can worship in this space and be this black gay man who worships with all these other types of people, every race, gender, creed, and we love God.
Yeah. So you said be faithful, be grateful, and know that you're enough.
Yes.
You forgot a 4th thing.
What's that?
You forgot the 4th thing. And make sure you retweet Pastor Mike's quotes, because you do that really good. Listen, let's thank EmilWilbekin.
FCBC fam, I hope you enjoyed that segment with my friend, my brother, EmilWilbekin. And we're doing something in addition to rebroadcasting the journeys. We're also going to do journey check-ins. These are just follow-up conversations with our past guests. And so it is always good checking my friend, my brother, Emil. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Pastor Mike. I'm grateful to be here today.
Excellent. You know, one thing, when I looked at the episode with you, man, I forgot how long ago that was. And let me tell you how I know it was long ago. That's when we had the old journey set.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy because I thought it was like a few years ago. It's almost 3 years ago.
Yeah. And it blew my mind as I looked at it, because for me, I think of the progression of the journey with the progression of the setting. Right? From all the signs to minimal signs to the screen behind us.
Right.
Kind of the look we have now. You've been with us from the beginning, man. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. I mean, that's what was so crazy about that day, because I actually was working on the journey and I was the guest. So, but I was just grateful I didn't have to sit in the high stools.
Oh gosh, you talk about progression. Those, let me tell you, the high share in episodes were tough. Getting up, sitting down, not feeling comfortable was the biggest thing. But it was a learning progress. I loved it, man. But man, what's been going on with you? How has your journey been since those years ago? I know a lot of things have happened. Just share a few.
So, I mean, since I did the journey, I mean, that day was such a big moment in my life because, you know, when you're doing something like that, I don't know if you recall, but somebody else was supposed to be on the journey and they fell out and you were like, oh, I want you to do it. And I didn't want to do it. And so that was like really crazy. But I realized that I needed to do it. And, you know, I had bursitis on my knee the week before. So I had to sit still with my leg elevated with ice on my knee all week. And I was like, this is God like making me think about my life and being ready for that journey, you know, to have the journey conversation with you. And then doing it that day, I didn't realize what a big moment that was in the Baptist church, to have that conversation with me about being an out Black gay man, about being HIV positive, about Native son. And what was amazing was how many people, especially older women in the church, that came up to me afterwards. And they were so grateful for me sharing my story, because it either reminded them of someone in their lives, or it gave them the freedom to talk about an illness maybe that they had kept a secret because they were ashamed of it. So it was a big moment for me.
Yeah, I remember when the episode was over, we had finished taping it. We went back into the green room, and the whole team was just like excited, you know, and really moved, man, because it was powerful. And I didn't know you didn't want to share the story. I guess I don't really hear the no parts. I just get the.
Well, you know, it was crazy because I was doing social media and supporting Ricky and dealing with the talent. And so Mayor de Blasio was that morning.
Yeah.
And so everything was really hectic, and we were doing the social media with him. And then I had to go. I remember I went and had to change my boots and you know, get myself together to be on stage. And it was funny because Deacon Darnell and Deacon King, right before, took me into your office and prayed over me.
Wow.
And it was powerful because I remember Deacon King said, he's already covered, but let's pray over him anyway.
Wow.
And you know, I grew up Lutheran, so being a member of FCBC is very new, being in the Baptist church to me.
Yeah.
I'd never had anyone put oil on me and pray over me in that way.
Wow.
And I just remember that their prayer was that they asked God to speak through me bigger and deeper than I ever thought.
Wow. But that sounds like Deacon Darnell and Deacon King anyway.
Yeah.
But no, you know, I mean, we talk and we communicate often.
Yes.
Tell me the why and the what, I guess, of your trip that you took to South Africa. Talk about that.
So to answer your original question, what's happened since then? I had a big job at Afropunk for about 2 years. And so part of the job was that I'd have to travel to the various festivals. So Afropunk is a festival that happened in Brooklyn, Atlanta, Paris, and then Johannesburg. Mm-hmm. And so I would go to Africa for like 2 months at a time. And I had fortunately been to South Africa and Johannesburg before. I love the country there. But it's interesting that this last trip I went, you know, I was there and I was on almost like a pilgrimage. And I was journaling and I was, you know, reading scriptures every day and really affirming myself and being still and practicing stillness.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was kind of amazing to then come back to New York. And then it was all these buzzing about COVID and this disease and this virus that was coming and that we would have to be in quarantine. And so for me, it was interesting. I kind of took what I experienced in South Africa and that being in the motherland and being grounded and centered and brought that energy back here to New York with me to really lean into that during quarantine.
Yeah. South Africa was, when we did the church trip there last year, it was an amazing experience. And I can see it. In many ways, it did cause a lot of reflection. I learned personally that, you know, my family's from Barbados, and I used to always wonder, because you often hear the slaves came from West Africa.
Yes.
I would look at western coast of Africa and look at the Caribbean. I'd be like, hold on, that doesn't make sense. They went down and then they came up. But then when we were there, we spoke to a historian, an artist as well, and they said that slaves came from the southern Cape of Africa and came up through the Caribbean. Which then hit me differently because as I'm in South Africa along the Southern Cape, from Joburg to Cape Town, Beanie, it hit me different because I thought maybe this is where my people are from. Maybe this, right? So it definitely can make you become very reflective and introspective with that.
Cape Town, you know, and I think you and I were texting about this when I was there. Cape Town has a very high spiritual vibration.
Yeah.
I spent most of my time in Johannesburg, but I went on my own vacation by myself to Cape Town. And I felt like when I was meditating, it felt like I could hear God when I was there. It was powerful.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
powerful.
I had that experience on Table Mountain.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've already told my wife, when we retire, I'm spending half of the year in South Africa. I mean, I fell in love instantly, and it was amazing. How's Native Son going?
Native Son is beyond my wildest dreams.
Wow.
You know, when I talked to you for the journey, it was very, very new. It is still grassroots, but it was super grassroots then.
Yeah.
And since then, you know, we've had T-shirt lines with Bloomingdale's. I've done gatherings in Paris. I've done some gatherings in South Africa, and it's just become this movement. Like there's now 20,000 people following us on Instagram, and you know, I'm in there talking to people, and it's amazing how purposeful Native Son is in affirming Black gay men and making them realize that they are enough and they are whole. And you know, a lot of the teachings that you deliver and that you give us at church really resonate with me, and I take that back to the Native Son community because, again, being visionaries, dreamers, and doers, you know, I want to impart that same information as pouring into people and making them feel whole.
Yeah. I asked this, and this is probably my last question for our check-in. A few weeks ago, we did a panel discussion at FCBC about from church hurt to spiritual healing. It was a conversation with myself and 4 men who are part of the LGBTQ community. But you helped facilitate that.
Yeah.
And I was grateful for that. I reached out to you. I was like, look, I want to do something, and man, you made it happen. So I'm grateful. But why? I was thinking back about our conversation when we did the interview a few years ago, and how I said how for many people, our conversation that day might have been uncomfortable.
Yeah.
For some who may have been watching, who grew up in church, and when they hear a gay man in church having a conversation with the pastor, and then he shares a story. What I remember saying that day, that there's so many people in church who are so judgmental, right, about that. But to me, as you shared, it's about who we are, not just as part of FCBC, but as human beings. What did that conversation, that panel conversation, mean to you that night?
So for me, that conversation meant a lot because I thought about sitting in church when I was unemployed and I was in between jobs, and I was there with my boyfriend. And I remember being so distraught because I felt lost. And I would come to FCBC to get filled and to get some kind of direction. And the Spirit is so powerful in that sanctuary. And I remember praying to God and saying, please use me. And, you know, as Native Son started to develop, I realized that's how God was using me. So when you called and asked me, you know, 3 years later to do a talk for Pride with Native Son, it was like my 2 favorite things in my life. My church and Native Son were coming together.
Wow.
And that to me is what really being of service was able to enlighten and affirm the Native Son community, because there's a large Native Son community in the church, but also to enlighten and educate people who are not gay in the church, who may not realize that this even exists, that this church hurt or these experiences. And I'll give you an example. Britton Smith, you know, his mother watched, and she didn't know that half of the stuff he talked about with you had happened to him. Wow. And she was so distraught because she felt like, as a mother, how could she let her child, who she loved, experience that and not protect him and take care of him and be there for him?
Wow. So in that regard, that became that panel for him and his mom became like a transformational moment. That's powerful, man. That you know, I got several calls and people reaching out. I even had some pastors reach out to me and ask
asked me to give them guidance on how to have this conversation in church, how to start this conversation. They thought that what we had done was so amazing. And I said, honestly, my word of warning was, if you do this, don't become gimmicky.
Right.
And one pastor said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you just do this as a one-off now, because as one particular pastor said, he saw an increase in members of the LGBTQ community joining the church. If you do it as a one-off because you just want to cater to certain demographic, that's cool. I said, but what made it easier for us is it's part of our culture, our language, our identity statement. So I said, doing these kinds of things is a manifestation of the evolution of the church, my evolution as a pastor, but it is part of the lifeblood of the church itself.
Yeah.
I said, that's the thing.
And that word kept going because, we, on our Facebook page for Native Son, we had like 500 people watch. It's over 2,000 now. So that people are going to that as a reservoir. And, I always think about what you talk about, following the carpenter. And it just makes me feel good to be able to do something that is of service to the church and to God and to your ministry.
And no, man, you don't have any idea. That panel was a lifetime in the making, honestly, man, for me personally. And I remember finishing the panel and just being so grateful for how God had grown me up over my lifetime and helped mature me. And I'm just grateful to be in this space. Look, man, as always, my brother, I'm grateful for you, man, and thankful for your participation, not just tonight, but in the life of FCBC and personally in my life, man. You're one of the people who I value. When you do this work as a pastor, like you hear some people say it can be thankless work because you're often being pulled upon, and people always want, when they contact you, it's always a need necessarily. But I say that because almost religiously every morning you send me a devotional, man, and that means a lot to me. And because, what I do, you're often pouring in, and there are very few spaces that pour back into you. And so you've been one of those spaces for me, man. So I thank you, Brent. I love you very much for that, man. I'm grateful. Again, man, thanks. We had EmilWilbekin for our first Journey check-in, and this was amazing. And we hope that you check in next week for the Journey with Pastor Mike and the Journey check-in. Peace and blessings, family. Here's why I like the Journey, because people know of you. They know you're one of the best chefs in the world.
Spirituality is your journey. Food is my journey, but I also teach a lot about eating with a spiritual compass. Break bread with a stranger. Invite someone to your home. That meal is a conversation opener to why.
Eating was at the heart of the founding of the early church, learning how to sit together, to break bread together. I tell people sometimes one of the most vulnerable moments you'll have is to sit down and eat with another human being.
Yeah, the word restaurant means to restore your community. We have community that have to actually take it upon themselves and create normalcy. When I think about this moment where we are being challenged as people of color, as immigrants are being challenged, I'm like, I've seen this movie before and I'm prepared.